Now, I want to talk about getting to your first million. When you divorced, so to speak, from your partner, can you just talk us a bit about that divorce? Was the business doing quite well at that time? Mentally, what was it like for you to now go back into the business and run it alone?
So it was a nightmare, actually, because what had happened is, because he'd seen himself as the overall boss, if you like. He was the one who kind of had all the financial information. And even as a qualified accountant, I was just like, growth. Let's get new clients, bring on new staff, bring on expertise, bring on a tax person. I was very much like that. And he was very much in the background, controlling. And he was a controlling character. He's not a bad person, but as a friend and as a boss, he was a much better boss. And we had a much better boss-employee relationship. We were fine, we were friends, but when it was a business partner, I found him very controlling. That meant I didn't have access to a lot of the financial information. We grew it within those 3 years to about 10 staff, if I remember, and something like 500,000 turnover between us. And then, of course, when he left, he took his clients and he took about 3 members of staff, and he left me with my clients and 7 members of staff. Now, from memory, we generated about 250k of turnover, but we had about 350k of costs, which is what he left me with. And then, of course, we had the unraveling of the old business, which as accountants, we couldn't liquidate the business or whatever. We had to pay everything off. And it turned out that bad debts didn't come in and all the rest of it. So it took me about 8 years, actually, post-divorce, if you like, to actually finally pay off everything that we committed to paying off for in that first business. So not only did we inherit the debt, but I also inherited effectively 100k a month loss-making business. Yeah. And I was the personal guarantor on the lease because I was quite young and bold and brash, I guess. And I was a personal guarantor. We might have been joint on the overdraft that the business ran out of. And certainly I had the personal guarantor on the lease. So I had to make that lease see out its 5 years for a start. So it was a pretty tricky start, if I'm honest with you.
And then talk us through post-divorce. I mean, how did you then accumulate your wealth? Because today you guys are turning over pretty much £1 million a month. How did you go from almost bankrupt to some degree to where you are today? And how did that transition of getting to your first million, how long did it take you?
There wasn't a doubt in my mind at that point that we would turn it around. Not even 1% doubt. We got more debt. Actually, I got some more debt, and then I got my mum to put a life savings. She had 30 grand in a pension fund. She put that in, and about 2 years later, I think we paid her back 75k. So she doubled in a bit of money. But so she did that for me, and you've got to understand, at the time we're losing 10 grand a month, and I lived in a house then that was probably worth about 170 grand and had a mortgage on it of about 150, right? So at most I had 20 grand equity in my house back then, and we're losing 10 grand a month.
Well, what year was this, just so we get some context?
2009, 2010.
Yeah,
10 years ago.
So close to the last recession, literally.
We're right in the middle of the last recession. We're right in the middle of that. So in the middle of the recession, I'm in the middle of Deansgate. I've got 7 members of staff and nowhere near enough work for them. My mum's put in a 30 grand pension. I can't let that go. And I've got 20 grand equity in my house, and I'm losing that really over 2 months. So it was a case of, I've just got to get out and do whatever's required. I've just got to sign clients to the point. And I totally believed that we would. And we did. So we slowly started to turn the business around. It was just complete and utter, I wouldn't say panic, but there was not a secondary option. There was no plan B. I had to get £10,000 a month of extra income in ASAP. And I did, because I had to. So I went out and I found a way of signing clients. I was networking. I just did everything frenzied in a way that I could to first stem that flow, if you like. Then after that, it was like, okay, now how do we make 5 grand a month of profit or 10 grand a month of profit? Then it was like, because we had to pay back debt, remember? So it's like, how can I start paying my debts back? And from memory, I think it took me 3 or 4 months of losing money. Then we turned it to a slight positive. Then we needed about 10k a month positive to repay everything back. And that all happened within about 6 months. But it was nothing more than 7 days a week, 18-hour days, going to the opening of anything that I'd be asked to go, and just, I wouldn't say begging for work, 'cause that wasn't the way that I sold, but just constant selling non-stop. Working, e-shots, direct mail shots, just anything that I could do to bring in new clients, we did.
What was giving you the maximum return?
I've always focused on brand, and then the rest will follow. And even if you look today, I have a marketing team within the firm of probably, we've got 5 in events, probably 5 years. We've probably got 10 in events and marketing within the firm today. And we have our own newspaper. I wrote a book last year. We have the podcast. We email, we do 1 million events, we sponsor almost everything that moves. It's all about branding, and we don't get hung up on the ROI. Now, there is some businesses that you have to get hung up on CPA and ROI. If you're an online digital business, I wouldn't say, you just focus on a vision and create a brand. But in this B2B market, that's what we did. It was very difficult to see, and somebody will say, I've listened to your podcast and I managed to read one of your newspapers, and then I've seen that you put a women in business event on in the Leeds office, and they reckon it is 7 to 12 touch points, don't they? And so for me, if you've only got one touch point, they're not going to come to you. It's like, how can you scatter seeds of brand as many areas as you can, really, whilst trying to control the costs? That's what we've always tried to do, and we are quite frugal with our costs. It's like, we have events, I don't know if you can see behind me, but I'm in the Leeds office today, and we have like a 4,000 square foot leisure space, which has got a bar, a tennis lawn, a chocolate shop. So we've got a great Gatsby bar behind us, and we create events there without COVID, every week. So rather than me taking people to Ascot races or whatever, we bring everything to our own event space, and we're able to probably do 30, 40 times the amount of events we can do by bringing them internally than we can externally. So I've always tried to be smart in ringing the sponge on creating noise in our industry, and that's what we've done. So I always feel like if I've got client targets or industry targets, I will drop 7, 8, 9, 10 little seeds. It might be an award sponsorship, it could be all different charity sponsorships, it could be all different types of things in order to get that client hooked in. And we did that from day one, even on a very, very small shoestring, if you like. So we carried on, we did that. And when I was speaking to you when we met not so long ago, it took us 6 years to get to £1 million of turnover. And I just never thought it would take that long with the amount of effort I put in. It was painful. It was 7 days a week. It was on holiday. It was Christmas Day even. I remember once watching Linford Christie. Don't know if you remember who Linford Christie was, but yeah, I remember him winning the gold medal at the Olympics finally. And he talked about training on Christmas Day because it gave him one up on everybody else. And I've changed my mind now, but at the time, that's exactly how I was. It was like, if you work weekends, if you're in the 5 o'clock club, if you can work it all night, you're going to be all right in the end. And I still feel there's an element of that, but we'll probably talk about mental health in a bit. There's a balance between getting to the place you want to go with efficiency and with your health intact, that I perhaps didn't bother about in them days.
So what year did you get to your first million? It took you 6 years to get your first million. That must have felt like a relief.
You know what? It was so funny because when I got there, and I've talked to this a lot about purpose, I was fixated at one point. But saying that, when I was a kid, I was fixated on earning £25,000 a year because I felt like that was a lot of money to me back then. And then I was fixated on getting to £1 million a year. But I didn't celebrate getting to £1 million a year. Then I wanted to get to £2 million a year. And so in 2015, we got to £1 million. So that was from 6 years from 2009. And I remember in 2016 putting a 5-year plan together to get to 3 million. So I thought that was quite ambitious because it took me 6 years to get to 1. And I thought, well, we could, add an extra 2 million to that over the next 5 years. And actually it didn't go anything like that. We went 1 million year 6, 1.3 million year 7, 2 million year 8. So we literally jumped that million within 2 years. But then the following year we did 3.5. So in 2018 we did 3.5, which was effectively my 2022 projection or budget or whatever you want to call it back in 2016. So it just shows you the speed. We went from doing 1 million a year, and it took 6 years, and 2 years later was doing 1 million a quarter, and 2 years after that we're doing nearly 1 million a month. So that was the pace that it gathered once we hit that first million.
So please do subscribe for weekly updates. We'll have other interviews with other leaders such as Paul here